If you're a business owner who wants more business, you need a great website. It's where people first interact with your business. That's where Brand Buddy out of Pontiac, Illinois comes in. Brand Buddy makes your entire online experience a breeze. Whether it's building a fully functional and visually stunning website with custom tools and buttons, or designing sophisticated advertising campaigns, Brand Buddy is the one-stop shop for your business. At Brand Buddy, an expert developer will listen to your needs and visions before building what you need. If you want to boost business and grow your online presence, call or text Brand Buddy today at 815-743-3074. Ken Myszka, founder, president, CEO, and garbage man at Epiphany Farms Hospitality Group. Thank you so much for coming on today, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, it is my pleasure. So, everyone knows Epiphany Farms. Everyone in the area knows Epiphany Farms. You guys do so much, so how about you clear the air a little bit? What is it exactly that you do? What are your titles? And what does Epiphany Farms do?
That is a great question. My name is Ken Myszka. I'm the founder and president. I pretty much fill any role, but I think my most important job is helping to lead the culture and the vision for the group as a whole. My passion lies in growing food. I spend probably about 70% of my yearly efforts in growing about 20 acres of organic vegetables. I manage a 70-acre farm and estate. Epiphany Farms has currently 4 main restaurants, but I kind of feel like we have 5 with the farm and the amount of food we serve out there. I'm blessed, living a dream. I have an amazing group of partners. My wife, Myszka, and Chef Stu Hummel, who's our vice president and jack of all trades. So I think my official title is President CEO. I'm currently the executive chef at Harmony Korean BBQ. I've been there now for 4 weeks, and I'll be there for another 6 weeks placing a new chef. And then I think my next stop is to Epiphany Farms to help out with a few things, and then we'll be building and doing some remodeling at the farm starting in February.
Wow. You're a young guy. How old are you?
I'm now 39.
39, man. You're not even 40 and you're doing all this stuff. That is incredible. You said 4 restaurants, but might as well be 5 if you include the farm.
Yeah, absolutely. So our main flagship is Epiphany Farms Restaurant in downtown Bloomington. It's on the main floor of what was Central Station Plaza or Central Station. It was originally built in 1901 as the central fire station for Bloomington. It was turned into a restaurant in the late 70s, early 80s. It was actually a dinner theater to start for the first few years. Artie Nauer was one of the guys that created that. And then it turned into a restaurant. It was an iconic restaurant for over 30 years. 2011, we actually took it over and started consulting there. And I'd like to say that we turned it around and got Front Street moving in the right direction.
Wow. Okay. And what are the other restaurants then that you own?
On the second floor of that restaurant, it's Anju Above. That was our second concept. Anju means bar snacks in Korean. It's a fun tapas style battle of 2 cuisines, sushi versus pizza. Has ramen, wings, donuts. It's the coolest restaurant I think I've ever been to. I love it. It's a really fun time. Had friends help us open it. We opened it, I think, about 7 or 8 years ago now. But Epiphany Farms and Anju have kind of evolved to be a food hall. So now wherever you eat, whether it's upstairs, downstairs, or on the patio, you can order from all the menus. We also have a secret restaurant down the street called Bakery and Pickle. It's between Fat Jack's and Night Shop. It's a Prohibition era speakeasy, and it relaunched a couple months ago, and it's a really cool spot. You walk into this closed antique shop, and you find the book, and we say you got to push beyond, and you push the book, and the wall opens, and you walk into this like iconic, historic bar, and it's got a cool vibe, and we got a great team over there, Chef Blake and Peter. They do a wonderful job. So
there is no place like that elsewhere in all of Central Illinois, as far as I know. I've never heard of anything like that in the area at all. That is truly incredible. And for people listening who've never heard of, what's the name of this place again?
Well, it's a speakeasy, but it's called Bakery and Pickle.
What is a speakeasy?
A speakeasy is an establishment that's going after the original restaurants and bars that were around during the Prohibition era. So when it was made illegal for alcohol, these secret spots started to pop up. Over the years, the first one that I recollect was when I was living in New York. There's this one called PDT, Please Don't Tell. And you would basically go into this establishment. There was a phone booth in the establishment. You go into the phone booth, you pick up the phone, and then the side of the phone booth would open up and you'd walk into the bar. And only people that knew would know. and it was a secret entrance. So nowadays, when you go to a big city, you look up speakeasies, and there's typically like 3 to 7 or 8 or 9 of them in the area that are hidden gems. And they've evolved. I mean, they're all over the world. Wherever I go, whether it's Paris or Korea or Japan or New York, San Francisco, Austin, Texas, like I'm always looking for the speakeasy locations, right? You go in through the back alleyway, you walk through the back of the house, you go through the housekeeping, and then all of a sudden you're like in the dopest bar in town, right? So we always wanted to open one of those. We didn't like the proximity to all of the mess of late night downtown Bloomington. That college drunken, like bus dropped off kind of feel, like it doesn't really speak to what we wanted to provide for Bloomington. So we're like, you know what, let's just hide it. Let's not let anyone know about it. So on a Saturday night, you walk out of the speakeasy and literally there's like a line of like 50 college students that have no clue what is going on in there. And it's nice to have that back open. We closed it during COVID. And then we chose not to reopen it as like a casual takeout because we wanted to preserve the iconic feel of the space. We didn't want it to be like, you know, kind of just like casualized or whatever. So we just relaunched that a couple months ago, and it's going well. Our other newest restaurant is Harmony Korean BBQ. It's on South Veterans Parkway. Harmony means grandmother in Korean, and that is a concept that pays homage to the Korean culture and the heritage of my wife, Nanam. So ever since I've met Nanam, I've not only fallen in love with her, but I've also fallen in love with the Korean heritage. And, you know, we Korean diet mostly. I value the Korean.
And now, for people that don't know, your wife is from South Korea.
Yeah, Nanam is from Seoul. And we met in Las Vegas. Chef Stu as well, we had met in Las Vegas, but he's from Pennsylvania. And I think the last semester that I was in hospitality school at UNLV, I met Nanam, and I just didn't leave her side. We were in 2 classes together. She graduated, got hired with Samsung, moved back to Seoul. I moved here, started Epiphany Farms, got my first partner, Mike Mustard, to move here in March of 2009. And then the next day I flew to Korea. I spent a month there. I convinced her family to let her marry me. She quit her job at Samsung, moved here, and then helped me incorporate the business. And we've been, you know, partners, you know, ever since. We've had 3 children that were all, you know, born and raised at the farm. And she's actually like the secret weapon behind Epiphany Farms Hospitality.
You spoke before we started recording briefly about her responsibilities, and they are many. Could you inform the listeners and the viewers a little bit about what your wife, Nanam, does?
Nanam, like, I think is like kind of like our brand, I don't want to say protector, but like brand ambassador. She does everything on the admin side. She oversees everything from, you know, from the culture, from the design, and, you know, whether it's graphic design, web development, anything really. She does all the finance. She does all the legal. She does the entire HR department. She does all the technology. She oversees all of that. She can do any position in the company. And I think that's actually one of the key things with the 3 owners, Epiphany, you know, at Epiphany Farms, is that at any time we're never like enslaved to managers that can do, they're the only ones that can do the job. We actually can do every job, and anytime we step into those roles, and our leadership style is kind of like in the trenches, shoulder to shoulder, working with them, you know, not necessarily them working for us.
And maybe that's why you've had the success that you do. Maybe that's something that a lot of other restaurants just in the industry don't do. They're not in the trenches with their workers. I've worked in the restaurant industry a lot as a server, and sometimes at different places, you really see the divide between the managers and the workers, and it
absolutely
makes people mad.
Well, yeah, what I don't think people understand is just that, like, hospitality in general, a lot of times you're sacrificing yourself for someone else. And so because you're in a space where you're always providing guest services and you're always like doing things for other people, sometimes you don't put yourself first. And so hospitality in general has sometimes some like really dark, negative aspects to it. It becomes very, you know, so long story short, when we first started consulting at Central Station, when that restaurant existed, I was only there for a few hours, and I could tell that the place was consuming itself. You know, the employees were not inspired. They were there for their own reasons. They were just looking for cash and moving away. There was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of verbal abuse. There was a lot of drug abuse. You could tell that there was a lot of alcohol consumption. Like, it's just like a typical, you know, shitty hospitality restaurant or hospitality vibe. And, you know, with Epiphany Farms, the idea was like, can we provide purpose? You know, is it more than a meal? Is it, you know, is the dinner table represent something that is far greater than what most people, you know, take take a look at it, and that was the epiphany, like the sudden moment of insight that you can provide a different way through food, right? And so inspiring the world, is using the dinner table as a platform for social change, basically, is what Epiphany Farms' existence is all about. I think most of the world's problems can be solved by the way that not only at the dinner table, like whether it's governance, global governance, where we're working together, whether it's the health of the environment, the way that we're treating the soil, the water, the air, whether it's the health of ourselves, what we're putting in ourselves, for all the way from the food that we're consuming to the additives, to the chemicals, to preservatives. Our skin is our largest organ, yet we lather it up with things that are going to give us cancer. And it's like Hippocrates said that, let food be thy medicine, let medicine be thy food. And that is something that we don't really necessarily value as much as we should. And as a chef growing up and learning about like what does a restaurant mean and what should a restaurant be, what is the meaning of a restaurant? It's a place for restoration. It's not a place for rest. Being a restaurateur, it's actually pronounced restauratoire. And so when we go to these food service establishments, they should be providing us health, nutrition, nutrients, minerals. And over the last 150 years, it's like we're I don't know, we're not getting what we should. We're not getting the nutrients and the minerals and the health that we need. And we're not valuing the importance of the dinner table as much as we should. And so that was the idea behind Epiphany Farms, Let's actually grow the food, connect the dots, make it, one big cycle. Let's save all the food waste. Let's bring it all back to the farm. Let's create the fertility. Let's make the compost. Let's apply to our gardens. And then let's continue to bring in food to our restaurants that is healthier and healthier and healthier every single year, and cleaning, leaving the land a better place for the next generation, but really taking it to heart.
What a fantastic perspective on what you're doing. You're quoting Hippocrates in this discussion about your restaurants. It's obvious that you have a philosophical approach to what you're doing, and I am here for it. I love it completely. You mentioned a lot of things there, that we put things on our skin without giving a care about what it's going to do to our bodies later on. My girlfriend and I, she is a nurse in oncology, actually, so she's working with cancer patients all the time. And she talks about how insane it is, how much stuff we put on our body and in our body, despite knowing that it has known carcinogens inside of it.
It's mind-boggling.
And we're speaking about philosophy in a little bit. Why do you do this? How did you get your start in the restaurant industry, and why do you care so much about quality ingredients, the dining experience, bringing people together in the right ways for the right reasons? Where did this all begin, and how did it become this?
It became from the environment that I was raised in, watching my mom and dad start a business and having a small business become, relatively successful. Through middle school and high school, my mom and dad were always throwing big parties. They were always doing company Christmas parties. They were doing, summer picnics. We were having big, family reunions. And I'd watch my mom, always meticulously prepare the food and make sure the house was perfect and invite everyone into her home. And, just this amazing, gracious example of hospitality. And my mom and dad would travel a lot, and I, started to throw parties, and I started to cook for my friends, and I started to cook for team gatherings. And I was actually grounded when I was in 8th grade, going into my freshman year of high school. And to get out of the punishment, my mom was like, come to Wilton cake decorating classes with me. And if we spend more time together, then you're going to be better off. And we went to this Wilton cake decorating class at Michael's. And at that night, we were piping borders and flowers. And my mom was struggling. And then here I was just pumping it out. I was like, I love this. I can't draw. I can't write. I'm horrible. I don't feel like I'm a good student, but I love food. I love cooking. So I started cooking at what was called the Jumers, the Chateau. There was a restaurant called Le Radish Rouge. I worked there in their pantry and their bakery. I was a prep cook there. My home economics teacher from high school recommended that I go to the school in New York for culinary arts. I looked up the best school in the world. I applied there. I went to culinary arts school 3 weeks out of high school, and I graduated there. I did my internship at the longest running 5-star 5 diamond in Colorado Springs called the Broadmoor. I worked there, and I got a taste of 5-star 5 diamond, high end.
What does that mean, 5-star 5 diamond?
They're basically just rating scales for different lodging facilities. So 5 stars in the hotel world is the highest. And so that means that you have the highest level of guest services and amenities that are available in the world. And this specific resort had never lost a star or diamond since its inception. It was actually a lodge that was created for natural healing in the high elevation of Colorado Springs. And I was pretty, in fact, I was like, oh, I want to go learn there. I want to start, at like a resort. And I went to the butcher shop. And I worked in the butcher shop for like a month. And then I asked the executive chef of the hotel if I could move to the steakhouse to learn how to cook meats. And then I went to this restaurant called The Tavern, and I was their grill cook. I moved back to New York. I graduated. I convinced 5 of my friends to move to Las Vegas and to go to hospitality school at UNLV. At the time, Cornell University was number 1 and UNLV was number 2. But the president of the hospitality school in Cornell had just moved to Las Vegas. And it was in the beginning, it was 2004. It was like the beginning of the boom of the celebrity chef in Vegas. And so there was tons of amazing restaurants opening.
You were there at the right time then.
Absolutely. And I was turning 21. So I went from New York to Vegas. I came home for the summer and I went to the local farmers market in Downs. I met Dave and Karen Barron, who live in Ellsworth, and they invited me to their farm. And I went to their giant garden, and we went through the forest, and he showed me ginseng and wild mushrooms. We went through his garden. I dug potatoes and pulled carrots. I harvested peaches. I would go to his farm that summer, and I was so blown away by all the things you can grow here in McLean County. I couldn't believe it. I only thought we can grow like corn and soybeans and wheat, alfalfa. But anyways, I was going to school in Vegas. So I left and went to school in Vegas. And my goal in Vegas was to get a degree, but also to help open restaurants. I wanted to learn how to open restaurants. I want to work for the best chefs in the world. So I first started working for Chef Thomas Keller. At the time, Thomas Keller had the best restaurant in the United States called the French Laundry. He also has Per Se in New York City. And I went and worked at his restaurant in the Venetian called Bouchon. And so I started at Bouchon as a prep cook, and I worked in their bakery. I then went to a restaurant at Caesar's Palace called Bradley Ogden's. Bradley Ogden's was Best New Restaurant James Beard, and it was like kind of like the first true farm to table in a popular space, like kind of like Chez Panisse or any of the California cuisines. But Bradley Ogden is an iconic chef from California. I worked there. When I was working there, we were buying all these really, really expensive baby vegetables and microgreens. And I was like, I can grow these. Like, this is easy. Like, these are just beets and radishes, and they're just sprouted. Like, I bet they only live for 2 weeks. So I started experimenting and growing microgreens in my apartment, and I started selling them to Caesar's Palace. And I thought I was going to...
Really?
Yeah.
In your apartment, you were selling to Caesar's Palace
I was selling
your little vegetables.
Yeah. Not only to my chef at Caesar's Palace, and I was using them on my station. And so then when I was plating up these appetizers and I was garnishing them, I would garnish them with these like bull's blood beet and, purple radish and all these cool little microgreens that I was able to produce for pennies. And we were buying them from a farm in Ohio and shipping them all the way to Vegas. I was like, this is crazy. Long story short, like the chefs saw the efforts that I was putting in, and they saw how far I was going to make beautiful food. And I loved it. I was falling in love with culinary arts, and I was working full time and going to school, crazy. I'd sign up for like 6 or 7 classes, go to the first day. I'd sum up the teachers. I'd figure out which teacher like wasn't going to work with my schedule. So I'd drop 1 or 2 classes, and then I'd end up passing 4. But I was working 60 hours a week as a sous chef, right? Like around Vegas. And I was really just crushing it. Half the guys I moved to Vegas with went into nightclubs, and then the other half stayed in restaurants. And so I was working in these restaurants and I was studying. I was promoted. Chef Adam Sobel promoted me. The task was to open up the most expensive restaurant in Las Vegas, a 3 Michelin star restaurant called Guy Savoy. Adam went to Paris, studied there for months, came back. I was the first employee. I started picking up these chefs at the airport, bringing them to Caesar's Palace, and they were doing chef tastings to build the team, right? And then when we get like a month before opening, Chef Adam gave me my position, and I was like the head of the cooks. I was saucier. So I was the highest cook right before being a sous chef. And so I helped open Guy Savoy. We bought 110 pounds of black truffles to start our opening inventory. Like, we had all of the frills, and like it was a beautiful, like the best of the best. Like, our oven was like $500,000, like just the oven, right? But so I worked there for a year. Then I ended up leaving Guy Savoy, and I ended up opening up a restaurant for Nick Lachey and Paris Hilton with Chef Adam at the Luxor. And then I ended up graduating, and starting Epiphany Farms. But when I was at Guy Savoy, I read a book called Omnivore's Dilemma, and I was starting to get into environmentalism. I was starting to get into sustainability, and I read this book, and Omnivore's Dilemma is a life-changing book. And it was the first book that, to my recollection, exposed the industrialization of the food system.
One more time, this book was called what?
Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. And this book is an iconic book. Anyone that has read this book has changed their life. And so I read this book, and it talks about how the farm starts, in the Midwest. The corn, the soybeans go to the feedlot. The feedlot then, goes to our table. It talks about the consolidation of our food system. It talks about all these giant companies that are actually controlling our food and all these bad issues. And then, so like about halfway through the book, it's like, but okay, so what's the solution? And it's called Omnivore's Dilemma because after you learn all this, you're like, oh my God, the humanity has like a huge dilemma, right? So then they go to this farm in Swoop, Virginia called Polyface. And it's the world's now, he's the most famous farmer, right? Joel Salatin. And so I read about Salatin's work and I'm like mesmerized. I'm like, oh my God, like the cattle rotate on the pasture. The chickens follow the cattle. It's super regenerative. It's super sustainable. It's super healthy. Like as a chef, like that's the food that I want. So I learned that there was this like example of like amazing production. And so I started to take invitations from the people I was buying food from. I'm like, hey, do you have a farm? I was like buying the best food in the world. I was like, can I come and see your systems? Can I come see your farm? And can I visit? And so I was going and visiting all these farms all over the country and all over the world. And I was coming up with this idea for Epiphany. Like, what happens if I start a hospitality group and I go back home and I make this the basis of our production? We actually grow the food and sell it to the restaurants and
so
inspire people.
A little bit about farms, the way that the current restaurant scene and the food scene is doing it, for some reason doesn't work. And it doesn't surprise me. It's like you can't have thousands and thousands of chickens and cows maybe in one building and have a bunch of farmland that's you're growing corn just to feed to those animals. I don't know really how it all works at all. But it's not hard to imagine there are some problems with how it's done currently and most popularly. Oh, yeah. So maybe tell me a little bit about how it's being done wrong and how you're maybe doing it right.
Okay, so I think that the first issue, and this kind of is explained in Omnivore's Dilemma pretty easily. We had one, like, before the Industrial Revolution, when the economy was mostly agrarian, where people were actually living on the land and living from the land. They would have herbivores like cattle, right? They'd have sheep, they'd have goats. They would till the land, they would produce food, but all the nutrients were staying on the farm. Over time, as farms became bigger, as we started to ship nutrients and food off of our farm, and then with the creation of conventional agriculture, which it first started in World War I when we created bombs. We used ammonia to create bombs, and then we ended up developing like tanks and new technologies for fighting the war. Then after we got through the wartime, a lot of the technological advancements we used for production of food. So farms became much bigger. We started to use the bigger tractors. We started to use bigger inputs. We actually, with the invention of ammonia fertilizers, we realized that, oh, wow, we don't necessarily need the animals and the manure from the herbivores. We can just put this refined nutrient on the food and it's going to grow really, really well. And so over time, we had this like kind of self-sustaining, harmonious, sustainable system, but then we divided them and we created two problems. So we put all the animals in big buildings, and which is probably in the short term better because they're not in the elements, they're inside, they're protected. But then all of these things start to evolve. When you put a bunch of animals in one little building, there's a lot of disease, a lot of sanitation issues. There's not enough live biology to handle it. You have these giant cities of animals, pigs, chickens, cattle, and all of those nutrients are volatile. They're either going to go in the air and you're going to smell them, or they're going to go in the water and they're going to go to our lakes and our rivers, our streams, our ocean. They're going to create the dead zones. And then also now, since we took all the animals off of the farms and they're in buildings, we no longer have the nutrients that the ground needs for the crops. So now we need to spray them, or we need to fertilize them by injecting ammonia. and fertilizing with either urea or an anhydrous ammonia in the form of basically liquid nitrogen. And most of that doesn't stay in the soil and is utilized. So anything extra gets into the waterways, goes through the rivers and the creeks, to the ponds, to the oceans, and it also creates a pollution and dead zone. So we used to have all the nutrients on the farm and being recycled and used, and now we have these chemical inputs. Well, once you start to have these chemical inputs and you're only looking at what we call the macronutrients like NPK, calcium, things like that, you're not looking at all of them. There's 52 essential minerals and nutrients that are needed for healthy soil and healthy food. And we're typically in conventional agriculture only looking at 3 or 4. Only in recent decades have we started to look at like micronutrients, right? But these chemicals that we're spraying on our food, whether they're for fertilization, whether they're for herbicide where we're killing other weeds, or they're for pest, they're all toxins. They're all poisons. And we are basically waging war against nature. And it's not sustainable. It's definitely not regenerative, and it's toxic, and it has less and less nutrients and minerals each year. And the consolidation of our food service and our food production is really one of the other large issues. Another issue you have is huge companies, like giant multinational corporations. They own these farms and they own this type of production. Everything is consolidated. So things are now traveling really, really, really far before they're getting to us. So they have a large carbon footprint. It goes on, man. Like once you start to get into this, like it's crazy. And that's why when I look at small scale, diversified agriculture, as a chef, as an eater, I want the most delicious, seasonal, local, clean food that I can possibly get. And as a chef, if I can get a hold of that, then now I'm in a good spot. And so that's what Epiphany Farms set out to do. We set out, well, maybe we can grow it all. Let's try.
Fairbury Furniture in Fairbury, Illinois has added over 7,000 square feet to their showroom, and that means more selection for you. Why wait for your furniture? You can buy anything on the showroom floor and take it home today. So hop in the car and take the short drive to Fairbury Furniture, where customers love their selection, pricing, and their take it home today power. So many Bloomington Normal residents have made Fairbury Furniture their favorite furniture store, just 26 minutes away in downtown Fairbury.
Hurry down to Fairbury Furniture, where the furniture rocks.
I love pizza, especially pizza from Marchelloni's Pizza in Fairbury, Illinois. Experience Marchelloni's Pizza and their famous cheese nuggets for an amazing price when you order today. If you call them up at 815-692-4602 between 4 and 5 p.m. and order a pizza, you will get the second pizza of equal or lesser value for free. Restrictions apply. You can even pick up that order after the 4 to 5 window and still get that happy hour discount. As a pizza connoisseur myself, I will proudly say that my favorite barbecue chicken pizza comes from here, so check them out. 815-692-4602 and pick it up at 405 East Locust Street in Fairbury. They're open 7 days a week from 4 to 9 p.m. Just what you're saying here with the amount of chemicals being injected into the ground in order so that it doesn't die, because what used to take care of the ground was these animals, but we have to put them in buildings now and make a city out of them. Just as you're saying, all the problems that come from that. You're no oncologist, maybe, as far as I know. You're not a cancer expert, but looking in the last few decades, while there is a better rate of death from cancer, meaning less people are dying from cancer, more people are getting it. Which means more people are getting it, but technology is so good that less percentage of them are dying from it. But people get cancer more often now. Do you think there is a connection with the chemicals that you're talking about and the food that we're eating and consuming, the practices behind the development of these foods on shelves, and even the foods in restaurants? Do you think there is a connection with that rise, albeit gradual rise, of cancer and those farming practices? 100%.
100%. Absolutely. The business side of it is mind-boggling. Like that's the, like, in my way, like, it's the industrialization, the corporate economy, like it's crazy business model. Like that's, I don't know. It's like, we don't even want to really go there because it's like, it's just a waste of time. The world is a very, very wild place. I'll give you a quick example.
Please.
About 8 or 9 years ago, I was asked to speak at a conference in California. This was a conference at the CIA, which is the Culinary Institute of America, in Hyde Park, New York. That's where I went. That's their main location. This is their campus in California, in I think it's Yountville, very, very close to the restaurant I was talking about, French Laundry. And so I was there speaking, and I was doing a demonstration. I harvested all my vegetables. I harvested all the tomatoes. I brought a bunch of herbs. I shipped them with me on the airplane. They put me up at a hotel. I did a 20-minute presentation about Epiphany Farms, what we're doing, all the things we're trying to accomplish. I demonstrated a course. I made a vinaigrette in front of them, and I cooked for them. I was like a part of the entertainment side. This was a bunch of large corporations that were sending affiliates of their company, employees of their company, different sponsors, and they were all mingling, and there was hundreds of participants. Probably every participant paid $1,000 to be there. And I was here just kind of sharing my story. The reason why I was invited was because I was at the James Beard Awards in Chicago, and I saw the president of the CIA, and I went up to him and I said, "Hey," I was like, I'm an alum. Thank you so much for everything that you taught me. Here's what I'm up to. I threw him my business card, and then he reached back out to me a couple weeks later. It's like, "It's awesome what you're doing. Go to this conference." And I was like, "All right, cool." So I went and spoke at this conference. Anyways, I'm at the reception of this conference at the end of it, and I met a gentleman who told me that he was there on behalf of the U.S. Beef Association. And I was like, "Oh, no way. Like, I'm a farmer. Like, I'm into growing food. Like, what why are you here?" He's like, "Oh, well, we just created a documentary called Cowspiracy." And I was like, "What?"
I've watched it.
Yeah. And he's like, "Yeah, the purpose of this documentary is to dispute or debuke everything that was in a documentary called Food Inc." So there's this independent documentary that comes out called Food Inc. And in it, this Food Inc. was developed kind of after Omnivore's Dilemma. And they dive into it real hard. And it's really, really cool. It's an independent documentary. It's very, very unbiased in my opinion. It goes to some of the change makers and the practitioners around the world. It exposes the industrialization of the food system, right? So the U.S. Beef Association basically has a documentary creator create entertainment to dispute entertainment that came up independently and then outlives it on the platforms. And the way I mean that is that because Food Inc. was independent, eventually the financing ran out, so it's no longer on Netflix. Which one is still on Netflix? The one that was sponsored by the U.S. Beef Association. That's called Cowspiracy. So, the information out there is also misleading and false and sometimes manipulated. And so you really don't know what to believe. I think that a lot of these large companies around the 60s and 70s realized that they didn't need to convince everybody that one way was right or wrong. They just needed to allow for enough information to be out there for people to have two different opinions, which is kind of crazy. But in my mind, as a chef, the proof is in the pudding. If I crack an egg that came from a pasture that was raised on organic feed, that was in a healthy, clean environment, and I crack that egg into a pan, the yolk is beaming, the albumin, the white is stiff and firm. If I were to make a meringue or anything with the egg whites utilizing that protein, it would be the most delicious, firm, awesome souffle type thing ever, right? If I take one from the Walmart grocery store shelf and I crack it into a pan, the yolk is pale, the albumin is flat. If I make a meringue with it or try to make a souffle out of it, it doesn't souffle as much. It doesn't have the same thing that the egg has on pasture. An egg is not just an egg. You are not what you eat, but you are what you eats. And industry makes it very, very, very difficult for the things that you're buying to know what it ate at the location of production. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes. So it's hard to know really, truly where your food is coming from, what it is ingesting.
Exactly. Or how many nutrients are in it, right? Or how healthy that soil was, or how clean that air was, or how clean that water was.
For people that want to eat very, very clean, the way that it sounds like you eat, how do you advise that they go into grocery stores? What do they look for?
Well, organics is a good start, starting with organic. So when you can buy organic and when it's feasible, absolutely pick to go organic, right? But conventional agriculture, conventional organic agriculture, the type of food that's going to be available at a big box store, for instance, is going to be using organic certification, but they're still going to have a decent amount of chemical inputs to control pest, fertility, weeds, things like that. So the most important thing is probably to go to local spots like a farmer's market or a grocery store that's actually buying from local farms and buy from people in the area that you know and you trust their practices, not buy from big, large corporations.
So the Walmart organic section might not be as trustworthy?
Exactly. Like, for instance, when organics first came out, organic, the word is owned by the United States government, right? And so you can't call it organic. And for the record, Epiphany Farms is not an organic certified location.
Right. It's not USDA certified organic.
Right.
Because that means the United States government saying...
The United States government owns and has protections for the word. And then there's only a handful of certifiers that are businesses that are legally allowed to give you the label of organic. You have to pay the certifier to do that. And the certifier comes in, they audit all of your practices, and you have to show them everything that you bought. You have to show them all the seeds that you bought. You have to show them they look at everything. You have to pay them to do that. When I first looked at organic certification, it's like thousands of dollars for us to have it initially. And it's also a ton of administrative time. Like, I'd like to say I'm beyond organic, but like, we have such a local connection, and we're selling to mostly about 95% of our food goes directly to our own restaurants. And so I don't need to waste the time to bring in a third party certifier because we do it our own way. I have to buy another piece of equipment, or I have to invest in our farm, or the restaurants need to be upgraded. So it's like organic certification is kind of on the bucket list, but over time, it's more and more bought out every year. I mean, I can still buy toxic chemicals that are certified organic, and I wouldn't want to drink those things. I certainly don't want to put them on my food. They still kill things, right?
So for the listeners and the viewers, are you willing to go on record, Ken, say that Epiphany Farms and all the food that it sells is organic?
No, it's not. We're not certified organic. We have organic practices. So all the food that I grow could become certified organic, but I don't pay a certifier. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. But you were kind of saying that you're beyond organic.
Well,
would organic people eat your food and be okay with it?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Absolutely. But also the restaurant, when we buy food, we don't only buy organic. It's very difficult for us to only buy organic and then still have a price point that people can afford.
I was gonna say, because I'm like, organic stuff is usually pretty darn expensive, but your place's food is it's very fairly priced.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. We're, there was a time back in the day when Epiphany Farms was like a little bit more expensive. In the beginning, it was called Station 220. And I can remember when we were really focused on like tasting menus and high class, the servers wore vests, things like that. Like, people would open up the check and be like, whoa, it's like kind of expensive. And so when we kind of rebranded, it was about like 8 years ago or so, we were like, all right, let's try to do our best to make it, affordable as much as possible, because we want people to enjoy it. If we don't have a lot of guests coming through the door, then it's not going to work. So
on that note, I have been to Harmony, Korean BBQ. Me and my friends went, and we were blown away. It was, when I think of your place, of course you think of Epiphany Farms, you think of all the places, the restaurants that you have. It is truly delicious. And I'll say that this is not sponsored by Epiphany Farms. It is unbelievably delicious. I believe Epiphany Farms Restaurant is the #1 restaurant in Bloomington Normal, according to reviews on all sorts of different places. I think Google Reviews has you as #1, and also some restaurant review or TripAdvisor, some has you as #1. It's incredible. It's delicious. And I want to ask a little more about how you make it so delicious. But
it's the technique. It's high quality culinary technique. It's gastronomy. And the owners, the practitioners, the managers, like, we're not trying to be the best restaurant in Bloomington Normal. We're trying to be the best restaurant we can be in the world. And that's a completely different mindset. And, we've been to some of the best restaurants in the world, and that's what we look up to, and that's what we want to be. I think our restaurants could be a hell of a lot better, in all honesty. But we're doing a good job, and we got a really good team, and we're really, really lucky that we're in a community that supports us.
The best sushi in Central Illinois is Anju Above sushi. That I've had a lot of sushi, and that stuff was unbelievable. And they slice it up right in front of you, too.
Yeah, it's an open kitchen. Right. Well, I mean, like, I think we're probably the only spot in Bloomington that, like, for instance, if you get a California roll, right, everywhere serves imitation crab. It's not real crab, right? It's
what?
Yeah, it's all imitation, right? But Epiphany Farms, Anju Above, like, we don't buy imitation. Like, there's no preservatives, there's no artificial ingredients, there's no dyes, there's nothing that's like even preserved. We try our best to like serve healthy, clean food, And the other thing is that, we're connected to our food. We taste it. We make sure that it tastes right. We make sure that the salinity is there, that there's enough fat, there's enough acid, right? It's got richness. It has saltiness. It has bitterness. It has sweetness. Like, you need balance in food. And so, like, all the sauces are homemade. All the bread is homemade. Everything is made from scratch. Everything is tasted. We eat our own food. We grow our own food. Like, that's
where do you get your meat from?
A lot of the meat is conventional. We do have to buy a lot of, like, when I say conventional, I just mean it's not certified organic and it's like corn fed. So, but we also feature a lot of local meat as well. We raise all the chicken. We raise all the pork. So like when I say the meat that we're buying would be like some of the beef, the tuna, the salmon.
No fish farms around here probably.
Right. Now there are some ways, like in the future, we would love to be able to get like local bluegill and local fish, but we have a long way to go before we can have that type of sustainable production. But it is a dream of ours to be able to do a lot of that stuff as well. Right now, globally at Epiphany Farms Restaurant, we produce about 25% of the food. So we'll sell upwards to $300,000 worth of food to the restaurant. And the restaurant's buying like $1.2, $1.3 million in food a year.
I see.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Those are big numbers.
Yeah, we also, we buy from like local dairy, like Kilgus Farms.
Hometown Fairbury.
Yep. We got
Schlegel meats at all?
We buy some Schlegel. Now Schlegel does beef that I'd like to feature at the restaurants. They also do pork and chicken, but we raise all of our own pork. We raise all of our own chicken. Now Harmony, we can't supply enough pork for Harmony. So Harmony buys pork, but the farm team, Jacob, the farm is growing a lot. We added 5 buildings last year. We've been really increasing our production. And so the goal is to be able to provide the vast majority of our food. And I do think that in the next like 4 or 5 years, we'll be upwards to 50% of the food that we buy is actually coming from our own farm. Which is
now
cool.
You said the buildings on the farm. We were just talking about how putting the animals in the buildings is part of the problem.
Right.
When you say your animals in these buildings, are they in these buildings for good? Do they ever get out of the buildings? Sorry if I'm putting you in a weird spot.
No, they're not. They're not buildings for animals. I mean, some of them kind of are. So I think what you're referring to, what I was referring to, is called a CAFO, a confined animal feeding operation. And this is the way that most of the poultry and swine is raised, and most of the beef is raised in the country. That's not how we do it at our farm. Right now in the winter, we do have a building that all the animals, right now we have some pigs in there. We have the ducks. We have the laying hens. There's some peacocks that are in there. And they come in for shelter in the winter. They have heated waters. It's still cold in there. It's not heated. But they can get out on pasture and they leave. We raise the broiler chickens, which are the meat chickens that we eat. We only raise those 6 months out of the year. We only raise those when they can be on pasture. The laying hens, they live through the winter. All the pigs are actually right now in the forest. We raise about 100 hogs at a year at the farm, and those are all free range. We got Jacob makes like huts, and we insulate them with hay, and there's these little like almost like cellars or bunkers the animals go into. They're super comfortable.
So they live in a great life, actually. It sounds like
absolutely.
They're not trapped in a concrete building.
No.
That's
so like
incredible.
The buildings that we built at the farm this last year, we built a new pack and wash shed for all the vegetables. We built a big walk-in freezer and walk-in refrigerator, a new farm office. We built a new farm store. We added a catering garage behind the event barn for doing the weddings and the events.
Been there. Incredible. Gorgeous. Stunning view. I've never seen it. I didn't know it existed in central Illinois. I didn't know you could overlook much of anything in Illinois.
Right.
But you certainly do at that place.
It's a dream spot. And that is a dream come true, that location. We've been at that farm now, I think, for 6 years. That farm is the impetus of Epiphany Farms, because that was my home when I was in high school. So I lived there and I fell in love with the landscape. And then when I went on my journey and decided to come home, I always dreamed of buying that. So about 6 years ago, when the company was able to buy the Epiphany Farms Estate, it was like, all right, dreams do come true. This is great. So yeah, we're there. I was able to live there for a couple of years in the beginning, and then I knew that when it would be successful and get busier, I'd want to move. So we use that as a wedding venue and an Airbnb, and it's a bed and breakfast basically. So people can stay there and they spend the whole weekend there, and they do the rehearsals and receptions and all their their wedding weekend stuff, and we're adding amenities for the groomsmen and for the guests. It's cool, man. It's a fun property.
I can see by the smile on your face and the tone of your voice that you love what you do and you're having fun doing it. And I apologize for jumping around to both you and the listeners, but we were talking about how you even came to be doing this in the first place, and we left off, you were talking about you were in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Can you finish the story a little bit about how you went from there to starting
Epiphany Farms? Oh, yeah. So, so I was at the Geese of War. I read Omnivore's Dilemma. I had an epiphany, a sudden moment of insight that the future of food could be fixed with the dinner table if we went back to the land and started to recreate these more harmonious and holistic systems. I was still going to UNLV, needing to get my degree. I started writing the business plan. I started telling all my friends about Epiphany Farms. I started to convince them. I started to research it. I started to go to the best farms around the world. My best friend at the time, Marcel, I went to school with him in New York. He moved to Vegas. He was working at another high-end restaurant. He was on Top Chef. He was on season 2. During Top Chef, before he went on the show, we trained together. I sharpened his knives and we got him ready for the show. And he went on, he crushed it. He got to the final 4. They came and filmed him in his apartment, and I was sharpening his knives. I was on one of the episodes. Long story short, then season 3 rolls around. They do the casting call at Geese of War. So I was there to open the restaurant for him. And I see my former teacher from the CIA trying to get on the show, right? I'm just like, Jesus. So we cooked the interviewers lunch, me and my friend Hung. And after lunch, and after we cooked for them, after they interviewed all these people for the show, they came into the kitchen and like, one of you guys want to be on the show? And I looked at Hung. I'm like, Hung, yeah, you got it. And I knew it. And so sure enough, he got on the show.
Oh, you did.
And he won. And
whoa.
So he wins $100,000. And so we're super excited about this, right? He comes back. He's supposed to be confidential about it, but obviously I'm his best friend, so he tells me. And he ends up winning $100,000. He signs a contract for a restaurant in New York, and I moved in Manhattan to help him open this restaurant. And so we took over a restaurant called Solo in Midtown Manhattan. And me, Marcel, and Hung that were there for the summer. And I was telling him, I was like, I got to go back to Vegas. I got 3 classes left to graduate. And I was, at this point, I'm like, Epiphany Farms, where is that? Because what happened was they were doing all the food and wine festivals around the country, and they needed to bring a sous chef to do these big dinners at these food and wine festivals. So they took me. So all of a sudden I was going to the show in Aspen. I was going to the show in South Beach. I was going to the show in Chicago. I went all over New York with them. And everywhere I went, I saw the industry was going towards local, seasonal, organic, regenerative cuisine. And so then it was really solidified in my mind. I was like, okay, this is the future. And when I come home, it's 10 years behind. No one's talking about it. This can have a lot of impact in my hometown. I was like, I can go back there. It was 2008. The recession hits, financial collapse. All my friends that bought houses in Vegas end up having to go through foreclosures, things like that. And I was like, man, what better time to disappear and go back to the land than now? I'm going. So I had somehow come up with $20,000.
How somehow?
Well, I saved it and then I borrowed against it. So I had $11,000 saved up in the bank. I was willing to do that. So I went to friends and family. I was like, hey, can you borrow me some money? I was like, I got it. I'll guarantee it. I'll get it paid back to you in a year. I was like, but I want to start this farm. I need to rent land. I got to buy a greenhouse. I got to buy chickens. I got to buy pigs. I got to buy equipment. And I need a partner. I got to find an employee to help me. So I walked in December of 2008 for graduation. Me and Anam had met that semester. We were in 2 of the 3 classes together. And she got hired with Samsung, moved back to Seoul, Korea. I started Epiphany Farms, and then I got Mike Mustard to move here in March. I flew to Korea to ask Nanam to marry me. I spent a month with her family, convinced her to move here.
How old were you again?
I was 25. Yeah, so Nanam moved here in June. By July, we incorporated the business. And then I got Chef Stu to move here in September. When Chef Stu showed up, we ran out of money. We had already spent it all. We were only making $150 selling at the Downs Farmers Market. I was apprenticing for Dave Barron, that farm I told you about. I went to his farm, was studying there and working there during the day, and I'd go back to my farm, work there all night. And then I realized, I was like, we're going to go out of business unless we start like making more money. I'd start cooking for people. So I became a cooking instructor at the Garlic Press in Uptown Normal. And then I started doing dinner parties. And once Stu joined, we did 115 dinner parties in 1 year. We were on the front page of the Chicago Tribune, a 4-page spread. They sent a reporter, Kevin Pang, to come live at the farm for the week and document what we were doing. Yeah, the article was called Epiphany or Bust. Is this the future of food, or is this guy crazy? It was basically the article. And so we put us on the map. We were pushing really hard to open a restaurant in downtown Bloomington. I was going around talking to banks, trying to get investors. And then we ended up consulting and then taking over Central Station. We walked into Central Station. Chad Ellington was the owner of the business in the building. And we were like, we're going to turn your restaurant around. And if we do, we want to buy it. And that's what we did.
Choosing insurance can be complicated and daunting. That's why you need to call Pam Deaton with Health Markets. Pam will help you with all of your insurance needs, including health, life, vision, dental, and disability insurance. She's consistently been one of Health Markets' top national agents over the years and continues to earn great reviews from her clients. If you or a loved one needs to find the right insurance plan, you're in the right hands with Pam. Call her at 309-287-2518 to see how she can help you today. If you've been living with an aching back, debilitating imbalances, or any physical discomfort and just want to get back to living a fit and happy life, look no further than InMotion Fitness Center and Outpatient Therapy at Fairview Haven in Fairbury, Illinois. Our highly skilled therapy team will guide you through proven and effective exercises to help you regain your strength, movement, and mobility, all with our renowned level of love and care. Live your best life. Call our therapy team at 815-692-6724 to find out how we can serve you today. Wow. When did you how old were you when you took over?
27.
27 years old.
Yeah.
And you said you were looking for investors. Did the bank give you a loan, or did someone invest in you, or people?
No, it never happened.
How'd you get the money?
Well, we worked it off. So the restaurant was losing money. And so we stopped losing money, and then we started making money. And then of the money we made, we bought it.
Are you kidding me? You must have been making good money then.
No, it's taken a long time.
Right.
It was 10 years. It took us 10 years. Yeah.
And the plan was to make what is now Epiphany Epiphany Farms. That was a plan the entire time.
Yeah,
for 10 years.
Everything that we've done to this point, like not the specifics of it, like not specifically like the location of Harmony or the bakery and Pickle or things like that. But when we look at the initial business plan of Epiphany Farms, the goal was to have a multi-unit restaurant group supplied by the farm. And it actually, in the business plan, it was that we would be in Bloomington, so we'd be regionally located to like 5 major markets within 2.5 hours. And so the goal was that we would be close to Chicago, Madison, Wisconsin, Indianapolis, St. Louis, and that we would be a central hub. Over time, we've really grown and valued being in one community. As I had consulted at a restaurant in Springfield for some time, and I realized I was like, being home and being local and being in one vicinity. So actually, if you draw a line between the farm and our restaurants, they all line up on the drive. So I can leave the farm. I can leave the farm on the road, and in 5 minutes I can be at my house. In 6 more minutes I can be at Harmony. In 5 more minutes I can be at Epiphany, and in 3 minutes I can be at Bakery and Pickle. And that's not only my drive pretty much every day, but it's also like our deliveries. So our deliveries from the restaurant, a farm, can go that way, and they can not only drop off food, but they can also pick up food waste and compost and bring back fertility.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's an incredible operation that you are running. It is very cool. It's inspiring how fired up you are about it, how passionate you are about it. The story up to this point has been incredible, fascinating. As we wind down this conversation, I want to ask kind of a 2-part question. What is your goal, if you can say your goal, maybe it's your team's goal, in the next 5 years and then maybe the next 20 years? What are those 2 timeframe goals for you?
Okay, so I think the next 5 years, it's not necessarily about expansion as much as it is about refinement. We've acquired the land, we've acquired the buildings, we've opened up the restaurants. Now it's about actually getting in the trenches and making sure that they are well polished and great examples of hospitality. That's number one. Next 5 years, I think, is really about just polishing what we've been able to build so far, and continuing to monetize the farm as much as possible. More specifically, the education and the farm visits and the tourism. So not being a local destination, but being a regional, national, global destination. That's the next 5 years. 20 years from now, I think my kids, Clover, Comfrey, and Morris, they're 10, 8, and 6. I think 5 to 7 years from now, I want to take it to new levels outside of this market. That's when I'd like to maybe go to some third world countries and divine some holistic agricultural systems. Be an example for great community, be an example for integrated regenerative agriculture, and hopefully teach and consult around the world.
Change the world a little bit.
That's been the goal since day one. Absolutely. Like we really, when we founded Epiphany Farms, we actually were one of Illinois' first B corporations, and we did change our bylaws to include stakeholders ahead of shareholders. And so the future of business needs to be businesses doing good. Making great economy is what I call it. It's like creating business, doing it for the right regenerative, sustainable reasons, creating profit, and then investing that profit in the community and leaving the land a better place for the next generation. That's the goal. And I think by us proving that we exist, we're hopefully inspiring and encouraging a lot of people around the world to also try to do what they want to do.
Now, how about the big meta goal then? What would you like to see happen in the world if more people thought the way you did and implemented the practices that you do? What would the world become? What would become as far as the environment, eating, and farming, and all that? What could the world look like in your utopia?
Okay, so the way that I see the future, let me compare it to me taking over a restaurant. Let's just say I need to take over this restaurant tonight, and the service, it's been horrible. Maybe I can serve 500 people at this restaurant, but tonight I'm going to only focus on 50. I'm going to have 50 people in this restaurant. Tomorrow, I'm going to do 60. Next week, get up to 100. 3 years, we'll be doing 500 a night. Every single day, we're going to refine things. We're going to practice. We're going to get better systems. We're going to get better training. We're going to make it a little bit better, right? But the population, the amount of people in our dining room is going to continue to increase. Well, when we get to 500 and we're at complete occupancy and we have a good service, well executed, the next day we do 500, for the first time, we actually see refinement because we got completely full and now we started to refine our systems. Before we were just fitting more people in the dining room, but over time, once we get to it, now we're just going to be about refining our system. Well, in the world, we have grown exponentially as a species. Unbelievable how fast our population has grown. But population growth is actually slowing down. Most of the developed world is now seeing population decline. Places like Japan, China, we have governments paying people to have kids because they're not going to have workers in 40 years. It's kind of mind-boggling, right? So around 2050, supposedly, the global population is going to stabilize at about 9.2 billion people. All right?
That's what I've heard.
So for the first time ever, we will have the same amount of people coming into our restaurant as we did the previous year. It's never happened before. I believe that the tides are changing, and when it's going to happen in the second half of this century, we're going to enter an era of refinement. I think the second half of this century is going to be the very first time we can actually be feeding less people than the previous year. And we are going to be able to look at all of these great examples that are popping up around the world. And we are going to have a much more sustainable, healthy, and regenerative environment. But we have a lot of things that have to change in the next 30 years to make that happen.
Fascinating stuff. Ken, it has been a true honor talking to you. I'm so glad we could make this happen.
Thank you.
You're a good man doing really good things, really impressive and inspiring things, and I just thank you so much for your time today. And I look forward to the next time I eat at one of your many restaurants.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day. I really, really appreciate this.
Of course. Thank you.
For sure.